What's up, everybody? Hopefully this works. I gave up on the whole Cardo thing. I did a whole vlog last week, and it was a good one, I must say. And you never got to see it because there was no frickin' audio other than the motorcycle. There was vroom vroom noises and nothing else, which sucked. So I had good things to say. Well, I think I did. I'd say you be the judge, but you can't. So, try this again. I went back to a wired mic. You know, the whole Cardo thing was cool and all, but it just wasn't working reliably. Apparently the Cardo has limitations on what it compared to, whether compared to your phone. So I would either have to dedicate it as a headset or dedicate it as a microphone for the camera. But apparently it just doesn't work toggling back and forth. You can get it to work sometimes, and other times it just shits the bed. So Cardo, be better. You advertise that you can do this stuff, but you clearly can't. So I'm going to break one of my rules, which is going to talk a little bit about politics. If you don't want to hear politics, you want to be those guys that like, I don't want to hear politics, I just want to watch vroom vroom noises. Okay, fast forward to chapter 2. I'm giving you a warning. We're going to do a couple of things. We're going to have a few topics today. One is we're just going to briefly go over the election. We're not going to go into individual policies and topics. It's just going to be more of what happened and what does it mean for the future. All right. And then we're going to talk about, do a quick review of my cruise to the Caribbean and why I've already booked another one. And I think that's going to be our thing every year. And we're going to talk about new motorcycles that are coming out. That'll be chapter 3. And I don't know, maybe we'll talk a little bit about status of my watch collection and some lifestyle changes I am hoping to start enacting, including investing in crypto and some other things. So we'll see. We'll see how far we get. So, chapter 1. Again, you better not fucking pull out. Every time I see a woman rushing up to the last second, not braking, let me preface it. Anytime I see a driver, it's just more often it's some girl texting and not paying attention. I get nervous. I'm like, oh boy. So, here's your warning. We're going to talk about the election. If not, fast forward to chapter 2. You have been warned. So, the election happened. We were on our cruise, actually, when it happened. I think we'd already left Haiti. Maybe we were going to Curacao. And then, or maybe we were on our way to Aruba, and then Curacao, or then Bonaire, and then Curacao. Anyway. We'll talk about the cruise later. It was awesome. People were awesome. So we went to, we're on this cruise, and we did our early voting, and I was kind of nervous because I felt like Trump could win, but I thought he'd beat Biden last time, and he didn't. We could say, well, that was because of COVID and some other things that happened. And had COVID not happened, the economy would have been rocking and he would have been the incumbent. That probably would have kept him in. But here we are. And I'm like, I just don't trust things. I'm like, Trump makes it easy to hate him. He says a lot of stuff, and he's not, most of the time, he's not actually wrong. But you're like, God damn it, dude. Why'd you have to say it like that? Why'd you tweet that? You're just giving ammo to the other side. But more often than not, he's right. But it was like, is that enough? Are people fed up enough with Kamala? And do people even like her? Because as unpopular as Trump is, she's less popular. Now, Democrats are going to vote for a turnip. Anybody but Trump. They would vote for Hitler before they voted for Trump because they just hate Trump. And they probably have more in line politically, ideologically with... anyway, that's a whole other discussion. We'll stay out of that rabbit hole. Don't look at what people say they believe, look at what they do. That's all I'm going to say on that. And so you're looking at, you know, Kamala ran for president in 2020. A lot of people like to forget that. Why? Because she came in 13th place. She had like 1.5% of the vote. She dropped out first after losing to Beto O'Rourke. She's the only person to ever lose to Beto O'Rourke. Her body wanted nothing to do with her. But Biden was like, I need a brown person that's female to round out the ticket. I need to lock in the women and the minority demographics. And so having someone on the ticket that looks like them. I mean, it's just not a judgment on people of color or even gender. It's just how politics works. People inherently trust people who look like them more than people that don't. And it's not racism per se, or genderism or misogyny or any of this other horse shit. It's just, it's kind of coded into your caveman DNA. The tribe of people that looked like you were more likely to be friends than the people who looked different than you that were more likely to be adversaries and want to take your stuff. I mean, that's before we formed cities and quote-unquote called ourselves civilized. That was kind of like the law of the jungle in survival. People that looked like you were much more likely to be an ally than other tribes and other peoples. So that's kind of been just hardwired into us. And nobody wanted anything to do with her, but he needed to round out the ticket. He's an old white guy. He figured, well, I could lock in the minority vote and maybe lure some more women over to my side if I put a woman on the ticket. So she was a diversity hire. She was the literal definition of one. And people get pissy when you say that, but it's like, everybody said DEI is a great thing. DEI is awesome. Everybody needs DEI. Corporate needs DEI. Government needs DEI. Everything's DEI, DEI. Companies are hiring and paying people $150,000 a year to be a DEI officer. Okay, well, then why do you get mad when you tell someone a DEI hire? I thought DEI was good. I thought DEI was commendable. It was something we should all strive for. Yet nobody wants to be called a DEI hire. Well, here's the problem. How do you measure your success in the world of DEI? If you hire a diversity director, which most big companies have, they have a director of diversity or something like that, some sort of job title like that. Their job is to bring in diversity. Well, how do you measure if it's working? Well, because we hired more brown people, we hired more women, we hired more gay people, whatever it is we're talking about. Okay, then you are the literal definition of a DEI hire. If you're saying that this was successful, that you would not have been hired before, but you are now as a result of the DEI policy, then you are by definition a DEI hire. But nobody wants to be known by that. Of course you don't. Because it implies that you couldn't have gotten the job without some pretty much white person's help. All the DEI people I see tend to be white people, but maybe that's just my lived experience. But it was like that with affirmative action. It was just a different label, but affirmative action in the 80s and 90s and with quotas. Well, we're not using quotas. You can't use quotas. Okay, then how can you measure its success? Well, by how many people of color we hired. Okay, so what number is successful and what number of people hired would be unsuccessful? What is that number? X. Okay, well, that's your quota. I mean, it's math. This isn't politics. It's not ideology. This is logic and math. In order for something to be a success, it's like saying, well, we don't discriminate against short people. Okay, but you have to be this tall to ride on this ride. Well, what is that number? Well, we don't want to say. No, there's a number that you say is too small because you'll be likely to get injured because the street belt won't hold you and the restraints aren't designed to work on a child. So you got to come up with a size that says that under this number is not okay and above this number is okay. That's your quota. That's your benchmark. Call it whatever label you want. It amounts to the same thing. So, that's what she was. And everything he put her in charge, she failed, and she wasn't likable, and she had no policies, and she incarcerated lots of people of color, ironically, in California for misdemeanor petty marijuana charges while joking that she smokes weed. You know, I mean, she just was not a good, likable person. She was not a good candidate, but Biden tried to hang on as long as they could. And when the cat was out of the bag, they didn't really have any other choices. It was too late. They missed their own primary, so it was either he steps down and by default she's the incumbent, she's on his ticket, but they couldn't put it to like a nomination type vote because they didn't have time, and then she would have had to run against Gavin Newsom and other people, and you know, that would have been a problem. So she lost. People didn't like her, they didn't trust her, they didn't like the direction things were going under Biden. She was part of the Biden regime. Biden was very clear that she was involved in everything that he did and all the decisions, and she cast the tie-breaking votes on some of his key legislation that ended up causing a lot of the problems that we're all facing. So, people said no. And it wasn't a fluke. I mean, look at the map. She only won a couple states. He flipped every single one of the 8 battleground states, or he got 7 of the 8 or 8 of the 9, you know, whatever it was. This was not just an electoral landslide, it was the mythical popular vote, which doesn't mean anything, but people just use that to whine about the Electoral College when they win really big in New York and California, and they get a bunch of extra votes in those 2 states, but they lose the majority of the other states. They like to go, well, but we won the popular vote. You know, every state is a popular vote. Whoever wins that popular vote gets the points for the state. And people say, well, your vote doesn't count as much. If you're in this state, there's no way to make it foolproof. The idea of the Electoral College was they didn't want a handful, I mean just a couple of minority, a small number of states to call the shots for all the others. But more than that, if you go back to the Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers, they didn't want the cities telling the farmers in the rural areas. Because yes, you could say, well, there's a higher concentration of people in cities by virtue of them being cities. Okay, but the cities don't produce anything. They may be the financial centers. That may be where universities are. Those are all things that have value to society. However, the cities aren't growing food. They're not raising cattle. They're not producing timber. They're not producing textiles, cotton, any of that stuff. All the things that the people in the cities need come from farmers, comes from agricultural. How many power plants are in, you know, New York City? None. Is there a hydroelectric dam in New York City providing the New York City power? No. How about the water supply for New York? Oh, that comes from upstate. Oh, rural areas. That was, obviously they didn't have power plants back then, but the point was, the founders were like, look, we got to make this kind of equitable. We can't have Virginia and Massachusetts and New York calling all the shots for the other colonies. And they knew that at the time there was 13, but obviously they figured at some point they would probably expand, you know, westward. And they didn't want the cities, that, you know, the farmers and the people that actually produced all the food and the building materials and all the things that the cities needed to survive, there had to be a way for them to kind of work together. And the overarching theme of the construction of our government and the Constitution was balancing power. They were very fearful of one group or one person having too much power. So in the government, you've got local and federal, and when you get to the federal level, even then it's broken up into different categories. You got the judicial, you got the legislative, and you got the executive. And even with the legislative, that's broken into the House of Representatives and the Senate. They believed in spreading power out so that one person or one group didn't have all the say, and that extended to the states. They didn't want 2 or 3 states at the time deciding everything for the other 10 or 11. And so even when it comes to things like ratifying the Constitution, you can make constitutional amendments. It's a living, breathing document. It's not set in stone. I mean, what it does say, it says and it means. So it's not like, oh, we just interpret it however we want. No, that's not what living, breathing means. But you don't have You can't just have, willy-nilly, like every time you get a new party in power, it goes back and forth between Democrats. And all right, well, we're just going to do this now, and the laws mean this, and the Bill of Rights means this now. You can't have a society where there's no foundation and you don't know where you stand, and it's subject to change every couple years. That can't be how things work. They knew that. But they did allow that, hey, if something really big comes along, and the majority of people are really on board with the change, then there should be a mechanism to enact that change, and that's called ratification. Most people don't know what that is. It requires 2/3 of both houses and 3/4, 75% of the states. If you get that much of a supermajority across the board, you can change the Constitution. We've done it before. Those are what those amendments are. But the Electoral College and the popular vote, all that's tied into that whole philosophy of let's spread power out. Yeah, the big states are going to have more power. There's no way to get around that because they do have more people, and that's why California has 53. Dude, go. That's why California's got 53 Electoral College votes, and Maine has 3 or whatever the hell they've got. So ultimately, the big states do have more sway. But it lets a bunch of little states who all are in agreement band together, and they could be as many votes as California. That's how they make it equitable. As equitable as it can be. Because California is such a big state with such a high population, and they are, well, historically anyway, they've been so blue. Everyone talks about Hillary Clinton. She had a 4 million advantage in the popular vote 2016. It's like, yeah, and 4.5 million of that came from one state, California. She won California overwhelmingly, but she lost the other 49 when you look at the popular vote. So her whole win of 4 million votes was entirely because of one state. And that's why the popular vote should never be the actual benchmark of how we elect people to president. Each state is its own, and based on the census and the size of the state, some states have more pull than others, but it gives the little states at least a fighting chance. If you did not have the Electoral College, Rhode Island and New Jersey and Vermont and New Hampshire and Idaho and a bunch of other states might as well not even fucking be there. They would have no say in everything. You'd have New York and California calling the shots for everybody. And that's not good for the country. But this time Trump didn't lose the popular vote. He won the popular vote by 4 million plus votes. We also flipped 4 Senate seats. He got more votes than any Republican in U.S. history. This was a landslide across the board. This was a mandate. This was a reckoning of the Democrat Party, Kamala Biden, and everything that's been going on. It was a referendum against this woke bullshit. People have finally gotten enough. Trump not only won all those other areas, he doubled his vote with the black community. He increased by 10% with the Latino. He massively increased his vote with young voters. Like, everywhere you look at this, and even in the red states, like California and New York, he pulled in much more votes and flipped a lot of counties. They ain't going to flip LA County. And other things that were on the ballot, like one of the props out in LA, all the soft on crime shit, people were like, nope, 2 out of 3 voted to reverse that shit and get tougher on crime. This was the red wave. This was a red fucking tsunami. And it happens. And you know what? Maybe 4 years it'll go the other way. And I'm fine with that. The difference here is Republicans whined about, oh, it sucks, Obama got in. None of us threatened to leave the country. It's like, all right, whatever. It's going to suck, but we're still here. We still went to work. We weren't threatening violence. We weren't throwing a temper tantrum. But look at the cries from the left. Oh, it's racism and misogyny. How? He increased his vote with all the demographics that you... It just boggles the mind. And it's that out of touch, that being out of touch, that turned so many people off. Black men said, you know what? What the fuck have you done for me lately? You don't listen to me. You're not fixing things. You're making my life worse. You only seem to care about what I think come election time. I'm voting for the other guy. And the Democrats answer, instead of saying, you know what? We dropped the ball. We should have listened to you. We lost our focus. Their job is, oh, well, then you're racist. They're telling black men that they're racist and they hate black women, and it's misogyny. Democrats have not learned their lesson. They're coming up with every goddamn excuse, and they're pointing the finger at everybody but themselves. Their candidates sucked, their last 4 years of job performance sucked, and their messaging sucked. Trump got out there and spoke with the people while they were shooting him in the goddamn head. And then he got up and went back out. He didn't back down. He took it to the people. Kamala paid Oprah now, they're saying up to $2.5 million for her town hall in support. Not to mention all the other, some of the celebrities and a lot of big social media influencers that had to sign NDAs with the Harris campaign to not disclose that they were paid. In order to support her. Of course, a couple of them did blab it. But she just, the Democrats are the party of the elite right now. All of celebrity, the big celebrities, all that money from Hollywood, spending $1 billion, paying endorsements to celebrities. Silicon Valley, George Soros. Everyone, the party of the rich is the Republicans. Not really. Not no mo. And I would submit it hasn't been that way for a while. Anyway, we're going to get out of politics. As we were on the ship, we voted early. The only thing that gave me hope was that I saw the massive concerted effort of the people, all the celebrities, all with the same messaging on the same days, even the same time of days. There was a very coordinated effort between the Harris campaign and the Hollywood elites and the Sam Jacksons and everybody else, the Jessica Albas and all those folks. But what gave me hope was when I looked in the comments, and 80% plus was screw the Democrats, vote red, Trump 2024. And I was like, wow, all these big Hollywood liberal beloved powerhouses, but I'm looking at their fans. And I'm looking at the feedback and they're getting pummeled. And I was like, you know what? There may be a groundswell here, and I think that's what happened, was that the polls were wrong, because I think most conservatives, especially like far right, don't trust those people. And someone calls up, hey, would you like to take a political poll? And they're probably like, F you, and don't want to talk to them. And so the people that do take the call and give the feedback are probably more likely to be, Democrats. And so they have a very skewed, a very heavily biased, maybe not even by intent, because it doesn't help the pollster to be known as inaccurate, because that's going to hurt their ability to sell their services next time. But I think conservatives are just more, I'm tired of being canceled, I'm tired of being ostracized at work or this or that, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut until I get to the damn ballot box, and then I'm going to make my voice heard. And so they got an unusually high sampling of just Democrats responding to the polls questions, and it gave them a very tainted and skewed answer and prediction that turned out to be not even a little bit wrong, massively wrong. We went from, it could go either way, to, holy shit, we got our clocks cleaned across the board in pretty much every conceivable way. And if they learned from it and would be better, I'd be fine. I'd be fine with that, because come more to the center. Get rid of the woke nonsense. Stop letting guys put on a dress and beat up girls and all this other horse shit that on some level is stupid. but they just don't have the ability to, I think it's good to not have entirely conservative control. I think right now we need it because we got to fix a bunch of shit. We got the adults back in charge, and we need to fix some things. But overall, I do agree with Democrats on gay rights and gay marriage and abortion and legalization of pot and some other things. So it's like I don't want just hardcore Christian conservatives running the show. I agree with them on some things, but I also disagree with them on a bunch. I think it's what's needed right now, but long term, I would like the parties to be a little closer. I would like... There's a bunch of oil right there. We need to stay out of the transmission fluid. So we always be careful at intersections, folks. You pull up and get that shit on your tire, and then the first thing you do is turn left. We're going to go around it and go straight. But these are things that are, I think there needs to be a balance of power, and we've been talking about how that was the way the government was set up. I don't think unilateral conservative control long term is the answer, because there's plenty of things I disagree with my conservative side on. But right now, the things that I think are bigger problems, I think the conservatives are in better position to fix. But all right, we're on the cruise, and we were like, that night, we just went back to our room, had a couple drinks, and we just sat there and watched. It was like watching the Super Bowl. And I started having a good feeling, but I was still waiting, because we've had that good feeling before where you go to bed and you're ahead, and then you wake up and all the absentee ballots come in, and you go from 10 points ahead to 20 behind, and you're like, what happened? Well, this time the Democrats didn't have a monopoly on early voting. Republicans took advantage of it. So, all right, fine. If that's how you want to, we'll vote for 6 weeks just like you, because that was what happened last time. Republicans were very mistrustful of mail-in ballots and early voting. Like, we're going to go and make sure our vote counts on election night. And that's great. Massive turnout on election night. But your one day of turnout wasn't enough for the 6 weeks that the other side had been voting. This time the Republicans said, all right, well, if those are the rules, we'll play by them. And we went to bed with him ahead. My wife woke me up at 3 a.m. and said, hey, go back to sleep, but we won. And the next day, we're a few days into the cruise, and we were happy as clams. We're like, this is awesome. It's been like a weight's been lifted. Stock market's rallying within 2 days. Russia and other guys, hey, maybe we want to start talking about peace and how to end the war, and all kinds of stuff. Hamas was like, yeah, we're actually open to talks now, because they know all the sanctions are going to be coming on Iran again, which is going to cut off all their supply of money and weapons, and Hamas is going to be trying to continue this war they started with Israel, but without Iran's backing, which means they're frickin' toast. So all of a sudden, everyone sees this seismic shift and says, all right, the adults are back in town. It's like we had a substitute teacher that just couldn't control, and people throwing paper, and it's like, uh-oh, the vice principal just came in and took over for the substitute teacher. Like, we gotta get back with the program. And I was kind of concerned on the ship. Not concerned, I guess isn't the right word, but I was kind of wondering, like, what's the mood going to be? You're on a boat with 2,000 people. Tempers run high and all that stuff. I was like, I wonder what's going to be like. And I will say, most people were pretty happy. The mood on the ship, we saw a couple people who weren't pleased, but I would say 75% of the people on the ship were like, yeah, this is a good thing. And that was good. And the cruise itself was great. Now, the ship was of the grandeur of the seas. It's the oldest and smallest ship in the Royal Caribbean fleet. But the price was right for the cruise, not the $9,000 we spent in the jewelry store. It's another story. Bunch of watches and emerald jewelry and stuff. But we went and we're on the boat. It's the smaller ship. I say small, it's still twice the size of the Titanic. But it's not those massive floating cities like you see the new, Oasis and Allure of the Sea and some of these other ones that have, an entire water park on the top deck, and they're like 16 stories tall. But it had been retrofitted back in 2017. The Wi-Fi was okay for me. It didn't work so well for Donna. But the food was good. It was a nice ship. It was clean. Our room, we were expecting like it wasn't going to be awesome, but it actually, it was nice. Here's the thing that made it really good. The staff was amazing. We met some really cool people. The first thing we get there, and the guy, I forget how to pronounce it, he just call me Putra. I think he was Filipino. He's like, I'm going to be your guy. I cover this whole section of the boat here on the 4th deck midship. Let me know if you need anything. The guy made a point of knowing our names, always saying hi to everybody. We went and the air conditioning wasn't working so great. Couldn't get it below like 74. We like it around 70 at the most. And I was like, if we could get a fan, that would be awesome. And like an hour later, he had a fan in there set up. He was just like, whatever you need. And at that point, I said I was going to tip you at the end of the week, but here's $100 now. I'm like, thank you. It was a good ship. Everywhere we went was pretty good. Haiti, if they call it Labadee or something like that, there's a little corner of Haiti that Royal Caribbean owns. If you go on a Royal Caribbean trip and they go to Labadee, stay on the boat that day. Go up to the pool because everybody else is going to be out on them. It's not a great place. It's Haiti. Haiti's not a good country. Right now there's no flyovers, Haiti, because they started shooting at airplanes and shit. The water's dirty. There's trash everywhere. Even though it's a separate part of the island, they own it. It has a gate and it's secured by armed security. You're still on the same beach. You're still on the same island. It's not a great country in the best of times, but when it's like borderline civil war and they've had earthquakes and all kinds of shit, and their infrastructure's not great. I don't know what their sewage and sanitation or environmental policies are, but the water felt oily and dirty. We were in the water for about 25 minutes and we're like, I feel like I've probably contracted some new form of hepatitis that they haven't discovered yet. I'm like, let's get out of here. Let's go back to the boat, go shower really well with soap and bleach. Let's go to let's go up on the pool deck and just hang out. That's what we end up doing. But I will tell you, Aruba, awesome. Bonaire was awesome. Curacao was great. Those islands are great. We're going to go back to Bonaire. I'm a big fan of Aruba. I've been there 3 times now. We just went shopping that day. If you want to go watch shopping, right off the port in Aruba, there's Breitling, there's Tudor, all the boutiques, and then you've got Little Switzerland, and then you've got Shiva. Any kind of watch you can imagine, from a Casio up to $180,000. I mean, it's got everything. Now, I bought my watch on the ship because, well, my sales girl talked me into it. No, she's awesome. We'll talk about the crew in a minute. I ended up going with a once very well-known brand, but a lot of people don't know about it today. It was a brand called Cuervo y Sobrinos. It's 140 years old. It was a guy who started it in Havana, started a jewelry store in 1862, got into watch building, hired some watchmakers, and opened up a shop and built their own watches and founded a company. I think it was his cousins, Cuervo y Sobrinos. Sobrinos, his cousins. In 1882, then I think they opened up a shop in Paris and one in Germany somewhere. And it was a watch brand that was very well known as a luxury watch brand, very Latin inspired, obviously, and from Cuba and stuff like that. Churchill was a fan, Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, Ernest Hemingway, and some other, big names at the time were into their jewelry and their watches and stuff. In fact, the watch that I have at home is named the Churchill. And I was like, yeah, I could go buy a Tudor. I could go buy a Frederick Constant or something, and I'm gonna still want one of those at some point. A Tag, a Breitling. But I was like, this is an amazing piece of craftsmanship. It's no longer made in Havana. And the reason why people don't know about it as much is because Castro came in, government took over all the industries and said, you're just going to build watches for the military. And basically that didn't last so long. So some Swiss investors from the Swiss watch industry about, 25, 30 years ago, something like that, came in, bought the company, bought all the rights, bought the old store in Havana, turned it into a museum. They found in the vault some of the old watches and all the blueprints. So they said, we're going to start making them in Swiss with our technology, our standards, but we're going to be making faithful reproductions of these historical, world-renowned pieces. And I'm like, you can't even get these things hardly anywhere in the States. There's a couple jewelry stores in the country that have them, not much. And Royal Caribbean is actually an authorized dealer, but normally you'd have to go to like Dubai, you'd have to go to Monte Carlo, there's one in Monaco, Paris, Germany. You'd have to go to some of these other places to get them. I was like, I'm going to get one of these. And I've got a couple Citizens, bought a Tissot for the wife and some jewelry and stuff. But let me tell you, you talk about Pucho, the staff is fucking amazing on that cruise. Everybody made a point of being friendly. They weren't just, oh, here, let me sell you something. Like, we would get bored. I mean, we're on a smaller ship. There wasn't as much to do. You're traveling from one port to the next, and we're just like, oh, you know what? I don't feel like just going and drinking at the bar. Just go down to the jewelry store. And it was like the people made a point of knowing your name. Milos is like, hey, sit down. Here's a glass of champagne. Sitting there talking to Josh and Helena, and Josh is all into guns from South Africa, and talking about how we met his wife and stuff on cruising and stuff. She's from Montenegro, and him and I are talking about guns and how gun laws change and what guns have you shot. And he's going on a freaking, maybe even this weekend or next week or something, going on to Texas for a hog shoot from a helicopter and stuff. And you're just sitting there hanging out with people that you normally wouldn't get to meet and hang out with. And oh, well, we should talk about Jaguar or Jaguar. Bud Light 2.0. Everyone was just so friendly, and we keep in touch with them. Everyone added everybody on Instagram. We chat back and forth here a little bit and stuff, and it'd be cool if we run into them again on another ship. They're not sure where their next contracts will be. You do like 6 or 7 months at sea, and then you're off for a couple months, and then you go to a different boat. But got to meet some really cool people. Suna, this beautiful girl from India, really sharp, laughed at all my jokes, so you know, you got that going for you, right? Anyone who thinks I'm funny, I'm willing to hang out with. But you know, selling watches, comes from a small town up, you know, at the base of the Himalayas in northern India, and she's out kind of like living the dream on a boat in the Caribbean and going to cool places and stuff. And same thing with Josh from South Africa, and Milos, I think, was from is he from Serbia or Croatia? I always forget. And you're just meeting people from different language, you know, from different countries and different backgrounds and cultures. But you get there, it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, who cares? Like, we're all people, and we got things in common, and we're having jokes, and just, it was really good. Like, we would just go down and hang out with them, and got to be, you know, kind of friends with them on the ship there. And it was awesome. The trip was good, other than the Haiti side trip. But everything else was awesome. I definitely want to go. I'm going to go get my dive certification this year, and we're going to go back to Bonaire and do some scuba diving. And Aruba, there's a shipwreck you can go scuba diving off the coast. It was a German, it's a German warship or something, and that's going to be fun. So, cruise is definitely good. I would say get the upscale meal package. We got the unlimited alcohol package. Total fucking waste of time and money. If you're not a raging alcoholic, non-stop, there is no way to drink yourself and get your money's worth without going to the hospital. But the unlimited dining package, where we could go to Chops and the sushi place and get surf and turf every night, oh, totally worth it. They lost money on us on that. But Royal Caribbean's really good. I went and got like a Royal Caribbean card through Bank of America, just like a $10,000 limit just to use for the cruise. But you get a shit ton of points, and then you use it for the cruise, so then you get extra points because you're using it for Royal Caribbean. So it's like a sandwich club card. After so many cruises, I'm going to have enough credits and points that I'll get a free cruise out of it. So, good way to do it. Did a little gambling. I learned how to turn $300 into 17 cents in about 16 minutes. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. But anyway, new bike stuff coming out. Chapter 3. The Yamaha R9, going to be awesome. And now Ducati is stirring things up because they're like, hey, the new V2 version of this and the Panigale is going to be a drop in horsepower. And everybody's, you know, jumping off a ledge. How could you do this? It's like, man, thank your government. All these restrictions are putting a stranglehold on cars and bikes. So Ducati got smart though. They made the bike the same weight as like a Ninja 300, but it's still got 120 horsepower with all the electronics and suspension and stuff. But people who aren't real riders, they're bikers, they just look at spec sheets and they probably don't do anything more than this or ride down the highway. They certainly don't do a lot of track days. They're just looking at the peak number and they're missing the goddamn boat. Because that bike is dropping almost 40 pounds off of this. So yeah, it makes less power, but it's got more torque in the mid-range because this does not, I'm at 5,000 RPMs. It pulls, but you get to 6,000, there's a gap in the torque. Now, you drop down and you're up above 7. And now you see how fast it climbs. This does not have a great mid-range. You have to ride this like a 600 and rev the nuts off of it, and then it rewards you with great power up top. And I ride my wife's Monster, and at 5,000 RPMs, if I blip the throttle, it'd be wheeling away in the first couple gears because it's got all this mid-range grunt. And I'd always said, you know, it'd be great if they had a motor with the low end and mid-range for the straight pulling off of turns in the mountains of the Monster, but a bit more top-end power. Ducati listened and said, look, we're going to put it in a much lighter bike. Everyone's whining about power. But when you look at the lap times of the Panigale that makes 33 horsepower less, they're the same. Why? Because you got higher corner speed. It's lighter. You can brake later. It'll stop quicker. 35 pounds doesn't sound like a whole lot. And on the acceleration side, it may not be as critical, but it is for braking and handling. If you don't think 35 pounds or 37 pounds, whatever the difference is, makes a difference, what do you think the kinetic energy is if you took a 37-pound dumbbell and you fired it out of a cannon at 130 miles an hour? Or 140, 150, whatever, yeah, let's just say 150, whatever you're doing down the back straight of Road Atlanta. If I took a 37-pound steel dumbbell, it would, at that speed, it would go through that house and out the other side. That is a tremendous amount of energy that has to be dissipated. You have to stop that kinetic energy. You have to bring that bike to a halt, which means your brakes have to work harder and you have to brake earlier because it's going to take you longer to get down to your speed to tip it into the turn. That lighter bike is going to go deeper into the turn before they really got to clamp on the brakes. And then it's going to flick in faster because it's lighter. I think the new bike's going to be freaking brilliant. I'm considering probably go with the R9 just for the price, $12,700. And it's got all the electronics you'd want, and wings and aerodynamic and all that stuff, and it's a Yamaha, it'll run forever. It's an MT-09 motor that's been around for like 8 years, so it's literally bulletproof. Hey, Moose. But everybody's whining about it, and I'm like, I think it's going to be freaking amazing. No concerns. So, mention Jaguar. And everyone again on the left, because they just don't get it. I don't see what's the big deal? Why do you care about Jaguar, you know, showing a bunch of trannies, you know? It's not that we care about that. It's not like anybody really gives a shit about Dylan Mulvaney. It's more about advertising executives getting so caught up in their virtue signaling and trying to show how woke they are and trying to out-woke each other that they fail to read the room. They don't know their audience. When you look at the target, who do you think the biggest customers are of Bud Light? Rednecks. It's not your millennials drinking their craft beers and their IPAs. It's freaking rednecks are buying Bud Light because it's cheap And you can get it anywhere. It'll get you drunk. Maybe make your cousin look a little cuter. I don't know. That's your target audience. Do you think your target audience gives a shit about or is receptive in a positive manner to someone like Dylan Mulvaney? Oh, they're just a bunch of homo... No, that's not what it is. Know your audience. If you're targeting really, really poor people or homeless, do you target them ads of you on your sailing on your mega yacht eating expensive caviar? Do you think that might make you look out of touch with the working man and people who are struggling to survive and make it in this world, and you're sitting there in your Bentley on your private yacht with a manservant serving you caviar and Cristal? Do you think you might look a little tone deaf and out of touch? If you say yes, well then you're exactly what you're calling everybody else for thinking the Dylan Mulvaney ad campaign was stupid. And the people looking at Jaguar going, you're talking about sophisticated British sport muscle cars, visceral performance vehicles, or the pinnacle of luxury. What does that have to do with a bunch of androgynous trans with purple hair and some dude in a tank top or a tube top? It's not that we care what you do. It's just you sit there scratching your head going, what are you doing? Like, what is the message you're trying to send to the people that buy a Jag XJR or XKR or whatever the new, 600 horsepower supercharged whatever? Do you think that's who's buying your car? Do you think the people that are buying that car give a shit about that message any more than rednecks care about Dylan Mulvaney talking about his first year as a woman and how he wants to get his period? It's not what you're doing that we have a problem with. It's the trying to understand why. And that you're doing it to make yourself seem like you're this caring, open, but how? By pandering to 0.1% of the population and alienating the rest? And by the way, the ones you're alienating are the ones that actually buy your shitty beer or buy your car. It just boggles the mind. And just when you're like, I mean, I know it's getting cliche at this point to say, hold my beer, but it's like, you've seen the result. You've seen how this movie ends how many times. And it's like people that support communism and socialism. You see how many hundreds of millions of people have died under those flags and how awful it's ended every single time without exception. But you're like, no. Those guys, the first 112 times, I'm going to be the 113th time is the charm. And it isn't. And then the next guy comes along, well, I'm going to do it right the 114th time. And it frickin' isn't. It makes me so angry to just see people wasting time, money, resources on bullshit that doesn't mean anything. And all it does is hurt the brand. You say, well, why do I care? Well, you know what? Because there are hardworking people that make Bud Light. There are people that make Jaguar. There are people that make these products and work and sell at the dealerships and work at the stores and drive the trucks. And when those companies get damaged because of some woke bullshit, a lot of those people end up getting reduced benefits. They get pay cuts. They get laid off. The working people that these woke, progressives claim to care about, and trying to pander to a bunch of, not even a bunch, a small handful of trans people, those actions, and for them to feel good, see what I did, I'm a good person. I showed how inclusive I am. What about the people whose jobs that your ad campaign, your failed ad campaign, just cost them their jobs and their livelihood? Maybe they lost their benefits and they got a wife who's sick. That's okay. They can get Cobra for $1,800 a month to the person who's now unemployed. I mean, seriously. All this nonsense of being I'm liberal. You're not. The word liberal means one thing, but what you do and what you believe is not liberal. You call yourself progressive, but what you do is not progressive. It's more often than not regressive. You claim you're compassionate and you want to help and include, but you include a small group and you exclude a larger group. You try to help one person, but you hurt a lot more people. All while thinking you're doing a good job, and you're not. It's very, that's what gets people mad. I don't give a shit, Dylan Mulvaney or whatever about, getting on a beer can or whatever. I don't drink that shitty beer anyway. But when you're sitting there doing this nonsense, and a lot of people are losing their jobs and the stock price, and the impact, it has real world impact on people because it always backfires, it always fails. And it's not because, people just aren't as good and as enlightened as I am. It's because you don't know your goddamn audience. And you still have your cushy marketing job. Maybe some of them get fired. But all the people that depend on you and that brand image and market share and sales, you end up trashing their lives and they lose their jobs and all kinds of crap. Sup, ladies? Here in the Mystic Falls. There's Damon and Stefan. And there's the clock tower up there. Mystic Grill over there. I gotta find the place to park so I can go get myself some lunch at the Mystic Grills. Go on. Oh, I can park right here. Love being on a bike. See, there's the Mystic Grill. We will be down here in 2 weeks' time for I Was Feeling Festive 2. We're going to get to meet with Cole Michelson. I know those are the character names, not the actors. And Elijah Michelson. And Micah Moore's character. Or Micah Parker. Sorry, Micah Parker, not Micah Moore. We'll do some videos of all that stuff. We'll be at the panels. We got some meet and greet scheduled. But there's a square. There's Scoops over there. That's been in the show. Social Goat's good. Yeah. Very cool little town. So that is the end of this ride with Dave. Everybody have a good one.